I've decided to buy two brand new speculative stocks, and I know what you guys are already thinking. Ale, you own way too many spec stocks, and you're definitely right about that. But in my defense, at least, I did sell half of one of my other spec stocks so that I could take that money and use it to start buying these other two. So at least I'm not adding like any additional money to the speculative portion of my portfolio. But regardless, in today's video, I want to talk to you guys about which stock I sold and which two brand new stocks I'm buying now with that money. Let's dive into it. Okay, so the first one that I purchased here, that's going to be SoFi, ticker symbol SOFI, who actually gets compared to Robinhood at times since they both offer commission-free trading for stocks. But what I wanted to do was I already owned Robinhood and I was actually up like 12% on my position last Thursday. So I decided to sell half of it that day and I started using that money to now buy SoFi and one other stock that we'll cover in just a second. But my last purchase of SoFi was right around $6 a share and I plan to continue buying it in very small amounts as it falls. Now, why do I even like SoFi in the first place? Well, I can make the case for it pretty simple. First of all, SoFi is much more diversified than Robinhood. Don't get me wrong, when it comes to investing, Robinhood has a much stronger brand and is way more popular with over 22 million users, myself included, while SoFi only has around 4 million. But those users are growing fast at around 70% or more each quarter, and they're also much more valuable because SoFi relies on them for several different, products and sources of income. See, SoFi is really an all-in-one platform that helps users with anything finance related, including things like taking out loans, refinancing things like student loans, personal loans, mortgages, savings, spending through savings and checkings accounts, and it even does a few super impressive technology related things that I'll talk more about in just a second. But really, investing is just a small part of their business. It's actually contained within their financial services segment, which only made up about 6% of their total sales last year. By far, the larger parts of their business are lending and their technology platforms. So, yes, it is somewhat of a competitor to Robinhood, but that's not the whole picture. SoFi does many other things. Now, some might actually see this as a negative because that lending segment consists of student loans, which have been paused for repayment for a couple years now, while also being targeted by Democrats for cancellation. And thus, it's become one of the largest reasons why SoFi stock has been crashing so hard, and it's currently down almost 80% from its highs. However, I personally feel that this is hugely overblown. First of all, the up to $20,000 of student debt that Biden is canceling only includes federal loans, but anyone who refinanced with SoFi now has private loans. So those loans don't even qualify for that cancellation. Plus, now that we know Biden chose to cancel 20,000 specifically, it's not very likely that all student debt is going to be canceled, anytime soon. Thus, borrowers may start choosing to refinance this coming year, especially when the repayment pause is lifted. And as SoFi CEO pointed out, the average student loan on SoFi is actually worth closer to 70,000. So there's still plenty of loan that can be refinanced even after the cancellation. In fact, there's still close to 50 million Americans with more than $1.75 trillion of student debt even after the $10,000 of guaranteed federal forgiveness. But even if we put all of that aside, SoFi is still doing a fantastic job just on their own of moving away from student loan dependence, which is something that Wall Street doesn't really seem to be noticing. In fact, their lending segment has now grown their revenues from $81 million before the pandemic to more than $250 million last quarter. That's around 3 times the amount, even with all the challenges around student loans. And it was in large part thanks to personal loans completely making up for those losses. And even though their lending sales tripled, they were actually still able to lower its dependence on the business to less than 70% this quarter by growing the other segments by an even larger amount. See, before the pandemic, their technology and financial segments were only worth 3% of the business. Today, they're almost a third of it. That's huge. Meanwhile, the legacy financial markets are ripe for disruption, which is why the fintech market is expected to grow to nearly $1 trillion in size, which, by the way, SoFi only did less than $1 billion in sales last year. And they're doing a great job of tapping into these growth opportunities by doing innovative things like providing application program services to help other companies build out their own digital banking products too, or with their several brilliant acquisitions of companies like cloud-based financial processing company Technisys, or the one that they made in Galileo, which is another fintech with a massive user base of over 100 million more accounts that SoFi can target even more products directly to. The result is that revenue growth is usually around 50% or more, and it's expected that their adjusted EBITDA profits this year will reach over $100 million. Valuation wise, SoFi is not exactly cheap at a PS ratio above 4, and they do lack GAAP net income profitability, but in my opinion, that's still pretty cheap considering the very large future potential that SoFi still has. And I know that the economy is trash right now. I know that there's plenty of room still to the downside, but I think it's worth the gamble for me. Don't be surprised if in the next bull market, SoFi returns to being a high flyer once again. My focus right now is to buy it slowly in small amounts, and especially if it continues to fall, and just try to get as many shares as I can at the cheapest possible prices. It's a spec stock. I'm limiting my exposure to it, not going anything crazy with it, but it's a stock that I do want to bet on for the long term. Okay, so that was one stock that I purchased. What is the other speculative stock that I'm buying right now? Well, that stock is Upstart Holdings, ticker symbol UPST, and I know this one is just as scary. It's been crashing just as much as SoFi has, but I think I can actually make a pretty good case for why I'm choosing to bet on it long term, just like I can with SoFi. Now, like I said, Upstart has been crashing just as hard as SoFi. In fact, it's actually much worse. I mean, there was a point where Upstart had skyrocketed to over $400 a share, but then it got absolutely destroyed, falling all the way down to just $20 today. That's a crash of well over 90%. Now, I'm not saying that I expect them to reach those levels again. I think 400 was absolutely ridiculous and it never deserved to be anywhere close to that price, but I do believe that it can at least double or maybe even triple from here if they can get back on track, and especially during the next bull market. So I went ahead and picked up some shares right around this price. Now, if you're familiar with Upstart, just like SoFi, this is another fintech company operating in a market with gigantic growth opportunities, but their main goal is to disrupt the traditional credit ratings and money borrowing markets by using artificial intelligence as a replacement for grading potential borrowers. See, their AI platform uses a much wider amount of criteria, and it analyzes all of that data to determine the quality and worthiness of a borrower. And because it factors in more non-traditional data points, Upstart is able to find more borrowers that might normally get rejected by older models, but that were actually just as worthy of a loan as anyone else. In fact, Upstart claims that 80% of borrowers have never even defaulted on a loan, yet less than half of them ever even get the opportunity to access prime credit because of the outdated credit rating models that still dominate the market. But with this new model, they've been successful at not only lowering interest rates for borrowers by over 40%, which attracts more borrowers to take out new loans, but that also increases the customer count for banks and financial institutions, which Upstart is then able to charge a fee for as essentially a third party connecting lenders with borrowers. And because their model uses deeper analysis, it also decreases delinquencies, which banks are also willing to pay a premium for. The result is that Upstart has been able to grow their sales by huge amounts, including a 52% gain in 2019, 26% gain in 2020, and a mind-blowing 254% in 2021, which is why the stock soared by such a giant amount. However, the issue is that most of that growth was because of all the pandemic stimulus that got pumped into the economy, which resulted in higher lending. And moving forward, they not only have a really hard year to compare to, which makes it really hard to put up the same, high growth in these next 2 years, but there's also record high inflation and rising interest rates to combat that inflation, which is destroying the economy and leaving us already in a recession, with most economists predicting that an even bigger recession is just right around the corner. And as a result, their revenue growth is expected to crash back down to just a single digits, which is why the stock is crashing right along with it. During difficult economic times like this, people tend to stop paying back their loans, and as such, Upstart's delinquency rate has already more than doubled in just the past year. But in my opinion, this is all being priced into the stock as it should be, and I would argue that it's even been overdone, which is setting up for a decent buying opportunity. I mean, you're talking about a valuation here that used to sport a PE ratio above 1,000 and a PS ratio close to 40, but they've now come all the way down to just a 14 forward PE and a PS ratio of only 2. That's even cheaper than SoFi. And unlike SoFi, Upstart is already profitable on a GAAP net income basis. They did over $100 million of net income last year. Granted, that's probably going to fall sharply this year because of everything going on in the macro environment, but most analysts still think that Upstart will remain profitable going forward, which is a big deal, and I think that can ramp up too over the longer term. But here in the short term, I actually think that SoFi is a safer bet. I know that sounds a little weird because, lack of profitability, but I worry that Upstart might have gotten lucky with their product, and I also feel that their product is very new and untested during these difficult macro times where we're already seeing it struggle greatly. So there's just some concerns I have with Upstart. Both of them are very risky, so I'm only, exposing myself in a very small amount to them, and I'm only willing to buy in small amounts over time. But I still think that both of them are just worth betting on at these prices. So that's what I'm planning to do. I'd love to get some feedback from you guys. What do you think about these stocks? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll try to respond to as many comments as I can too. But thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know what you think about these, and I will catch you in the next one. Hope you're all doing well. Take care. Bye-bye.